I sat at the bar, sipping my usual scotch and water, enjoying a moment of quiet. She caught my eye as she walked up to the jukebox and dropped in a quarter. To me, she remained the most beautiful woman in the world, a title she had held since we first met. I sensed she knew I was there, using this moment to subtly remind me of the state of our relationship, which seemed to be in limbo due to my indecision on how to proceed. The record took about 30 seconds to start playing. As Love Hurts blasted through the speakers, its lyrics transported me back to the moment when everything began. It had all started with a meticulously planned scheme by someone determined to bring me down and ruin my marriage. Almost successful, thanks to their determination, focus, and manipulation skills, aided by their power and influence. My dilemma lay in how to stop this person's relentless pursuit. I knew if they failed once, they would try again. The execution of their plan was so expertly crafted that no one would suspect the mastermind behind it. I understood why the situation was now reaching a critical point. The decision before me was how to confront it. The root of the problem dated back to the day Jody and I tied the knot. Jody's full name, Joanne Mandy, had been shortened to Jody by her parents long before she entered grade school. We met at a friend's birthday party a year after I began teaching high school. I wasn't seeking love or companionship that night. I intervened in an argument between her and her date. After diffusing the situation and seeing her date off, I phoned the local police to report his intoxicated driving. I provided details of his vehicle, leading to his arrest when he turned violent during the traffic stop. Unbeknownst to me, he had used Jody's brother's name in an attempt to evade consequences. Offering Jody a ride home after the chaos subsided, we conversed about our respective dates. I confessed to attending solo, citing financial constraints from educational debts. She found humor in my situation and accepted my offer of a ride. Her older brother, a police detective, had heard about the bust and was waiting at his parents' place for Jody to return, concerned about her well-being. I didn't know he was a detective when we first met. The jukebox blared, "Any heart, not tough or strong enough to take a lot of pain." Jody played the song intentionally, trying to help me move past the pain I was grappling with, like the unexplained nights and the lies that accompanied them. Ironically, she was making me relive it all again. My mind drifted back to the night we met. Like any overprotective big brother, he felt the need to vet me after I safely brought her home. He was the one who gave Jody my phone number, telling her I was coaching a basketball game at the high school that Friday night. Jody came to the game with her parents, only to witness our team suffer a severe loss. Two of our best players were distracted, caught up in a dispute over a cheerleader they both liked. Team spirit vanished during the first half, and we fell so far behind that recovery seemed impossible. In the second half, we outplayed the opposing team, doubling their score, but it wasn't enough to close the gap. The two disputing players had been benched, and by the end of the night, everyone knew they were out for the season. Despite the setback, we made it to the divisional championships that season. Jody's father told me I had made the right call, agreeing with my decision. The players had let their personal conflict undermine the team's unity. The next day, Jody and I met for lunch, marking the beginning of our relationship. She wanted to thank me for how I handled the situation with her former boyfriend. Jody's personality was addictive to me. She found humor in everything. 8 months later, I asked her father for his blessing to marry her, and he gladly gave it. The jukebox echoed, "Takes a lot of pain, love is like a cloud, holds a lot of rain." Love hurts. No truer words could be spoken, as they resonated deeply within me. Each day at school, I saw the smiling faces of young couples in love, reminding me of the innocence that Jody and I once shared. Slowly, I began to piece it together. Pat Robertson's son and I were around the same age. Pat, a woman in her 40s at the time, worked alongside my wife on the second floor of the Blue Cross Data Processing Center in our small town. They worked together 5 days a week, year-round, for 10 years. The 4-floor office complex processed medical insurance claims daily, each claim reviewed thoroughly to save as much money as possible. It was surprising how often claims were denied due to simple errors like improper coding, allowing Blue Cross to cut its claim responsibilities by 10%. I first met Pat Robertson, my wife's supervisor, on the day of Jody's and my wedding. By then, she had worked with Jody for 3 years. The moment I met Pat, I sensed her dislike for me, though it took time to understand why. Over the next few years, through staff socials and conversations, I uncovered the reason behind her animosity. As I watched Jody and her father walk towards me on our wedding day, I felt like the richest man in the world. She looked stunning, with her blonde hairstyle to perfection, a white full-length gown hugging her frame, and a smile that lit up the entire room. From the moment we returned from our honeymoon, Pat Robertson began searching for ways to undermine me in Jody's eyes. Over the years, she caused numerous minor problems for us until we discovered the reason behind her behavior. My wife learned to block out any negative comments Pat made about me. Pat had a major issue. According to those I spoke with, she believed my wife had married the wrong man. In her eyes, Jody should have married her son, Matt. Matt was a computer nerd with his own successful business, but he was socially inept. His upbringing left him socially backward, and he hadn't dated anyone in years. Most people who went to school with him described him as incredibly boring. Pat felt it was her duty as a mother to find him the perfect wife, and she saw Jody as that person. The lead singer of Nazareth sang, "Love hurts, love hurts." Boy, does it ever, especially when the pain is inflicted by others outside the lover's control. The situation became more problematic for Pat Robertson when Jody gave birth to our first daughter. In Pat's eyes, that little ray of sunshine should have been the child of her son Matt and Jody, not mine and Jody's. 2 years later, our second daughter was born, intensifying Pat's resentment. She believed these children should have been Matt's and Jody's, not mine. What I didn't realize was that this was when Pat decided she had to destroy our marriage to ensure Jody could give her the grandchildren she wanted. Pat was relentless and achieved what she wanted, no matter the consequences. She had a history of destroying marriages, having done it 3 times before, leaving the men broke and beaten while enriching herself. This reputation made her son fear women, and those who knew her background found her intimidating. Pat's position in the Human Resources Department aided her plan. She was promoted to Assistant Administration Manager and chose her successor for her former role as a sectional supervisor. This promotion gave her access to every security code in the data center, setting her long-term scheming into motion. Naturally, she picked my wife to fill her shoes. Pat established a pattern by sending Jody, with HR's approval, to every possible management training session and enrolling her in online courses to improve her qualifications. Pat believed this would hasten the breakup of our marriage by taking Jody away from family responsibilities. However, Jody was thrilled with the opportunities for advancement and self-improvement, which only aggravated Pat further because I fully supported my wife. Pat expected me to be unsupportive, but as a high school teacher, I encouraged everyone to pursue their educational dreams. One of the in-house programs Pat set up was the Thursday night meeting with all sectional supervisors. Since the data center was primarily staffed by women, this new policy angered many of their husbands. With 4 section leaders on each floor, 16 women had their routines changed overnight. The song continued, "I'm young, I know, but even so, I know a thing or two." The problem became clear before the truth fully emerged. One by one, the husbands found each other, realizing their marital lives were being indirectly affected by Pat's new policy. We all believed that if Pat had been honest about her intentions and identity, she would have admitted that she was a butch dyke. Between us all, we formed an informal social group, believing we needed to find a way to pressure the corporation into giving the mid-management staff some slack. One Thursday night, a father from our group, fed up with the situation, asked me to watch his kids. He wanted to see what was really happening at these supposed Thursday night meetings. He drove to the Blue Cross data center, only to find the parking lot empty. When he banged on the doors, security arrived, ready to detain him due to his agitation. Once he explained his frustration, the conversation took a serious turn. There was no Thursday night management meeting and never had been. When he accused security of lying, they quickly produced the electronic sign-out records for his wife, showing no such meetings for the entire period. Smartly, he had recorded the conversation on his cell phone. By the time the women were due home from their supposed meetings, every husband had received a copy of the recording via cell phone. We all discovered that for the past 16 months, our wives had been lying about these meetings. That evening, through multiple phone calls, we decided as a group to keep quiet for now. I realized I needed some guidance. The song continued, I learned, from you, I really learned a lot. Really learned a lot. In the middle of the night, it hit me that whatever was going on was Pat Robertson's latest attempt to drive a wedge between Jody and me. I didn't know if Jody was a willing participant or if she was actually involved with Pat's son, Matt. That Saturday morning, I met Jody's older brother, Bob, for coffee. He knew about Jody's Thursday night meetings. It had cost her attendance at some family events. Bob had dismissed it as part of her job. I told him about the problems Jody and I were facing due to Pat Robertson's ongoing attempts to destroy our marriage, deliberately omitting the reason why. Bob felt he couldn't look into it until I let him listen to the recorded conversation. Watching a police detective react to a conversation that implied a possible scam was enlightening. Bob's demeanor changed as he listened. How many husbands are caught up in this? Bob asked. 16 of us, I responded. It's been going on for about 16 months. I found out because I looked after another husband's kids when he wanted to check things out last Thursday night. It's his voice you hear on the audio clip. Damn it, Arlie, he said. Don't do anything stupid. We have 16 women and their boss unaccounted for about 6 hours every Thursday night. This has structure, routine, secrecy, and organization to it. Whatever is going on has been deliberately kept from all of you. The way it's been done implies that whatever is going on may not be legal, Bob explained. Just the fact that it's being covered up forces the department to investigate further. Contact those you know and explain that they mustn't say or do anything to upset the apple cart while this is under investigation. Bob, do you think it's that serious? I had to ask. Don't know yet. It's too early to tell, he said. But their conduct is suspicious enough for us to investigate and find out what they've been doing during that time. Send me the file with the conversation recording, others need to hear it. My gut tells me your friend stumbled into something big. I took my cell phone and called the friend I babysat for on Thursday night, informing him of what the police detective wanted us to do. He agreed to spread the word, saying no one had said anything yet because they wanted to figure it out together first. I asked him to gather a list of all the women unaccounted for on Thursday nights and email it to Detective Robert Parson as soon as possible. I spoke to Bob again at a family function a few weeks later, capturing a private moment. He told me that the investigation was ongoing, involving his department and the FBI Computer Fraud Division. He made it clear that he couldn't reveal anything until the investigation was complete. If Jody was involved, she would be treated like everyone else. At that point, I realized we had stumbled upon something serious. The jukebox boomed, love is like a flame, it burns you when it's hot. Love hurts, love hurts. Those words brought tears to my eyes, reminding me of what happened next. It had been 18 weeks since I last spoke to my brother-in-law Bob about the situation. I was headed to my mother-in-law's to pick up my daughters, running late due to a meeting with the parents of a problem student. In my eyes, Jody's mother was a saint. Ever since Jody returned to work after maternity leave with our first child, Sharon had stepped up to babysit our daughter. She insisted on being the one to look after her. We paid her $1,000 a month now because she took care of both our children. It was my own fault. I ran a yellow light, and a truck at the intersection jumped the red light and broadsided me on the driver's side. I was loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. As they were loading me up, I asked the officer to call Robert and have him explain to his mom why I wouldn't be picking up my daughters. The last thing on my mind was that it was a Thursday. When Robert heard about the accident, he first called his sister, but his call went to voicemail. After calling his mom, he headed over to Pat Robertson's house with a team of police officers. It turned out that Pat was operating a skim program on the data system at her office, and once a week, the 16 women under her had to work Thursday evenings to help her shave a few dollars off what the hospitals would be paid in their billings. The basement of her home had been turned into a small computer center, set up with the help of her son, who had bypassed all the Blue Cross security thanks to the code she provided. The hospitals she was scamming were all on the East Coast. Each bill they submitted lost $1 or $2 by adding a processing fee to part of the claim, which would ultimately be paid by the end user. Over the course of 16 months, with the volume of bills submitted, the amount added up to a substantial sum. Blue Cross's audit department hadn't caught the scheme until the FBI came into the corporate office. Pat Robertson had added processing fees to these hospital bills and had the amounts transferred daily to a separate account. Once a month, the computer would automatically transfer the accumulated amount to an offshore account. During the raid, it was discovered that my wife was not with the others. When Robert questioned Pat Robertson, he learned that Jody was with Matt, teaching him social skills every Thursday night for over a year. Pat Robertson clarified that Jody had refused from day one to work overtime. Pat believed that Jody suspected something else was going on and had refused to participate. All the other employees thought they were doing regular work. Pat had used a special performance raise to cover the extra hours the women were putting in, so they all thought they were being fairly compensated for the additional hours. This new processing fee was believed by the employees to be a trial charge the corporation was testing to see if it would be accepted or challenged, with plans to potentially implement it nationwide. These activities were conducted quietly to avoid drawing attention from the general medical field. Jody had refused to participate in the scheme but was forced to agree to secrecy to keep her job. Instead, she was tasked with teaching Matt how to navigate social norms. That night, they had gone out for dinner at the private golf club where Matt was a member. Robert left the cleanup to his team and, along with another officer, drove to the private club in Jackson to arrest Matt and inform his sister that I was in the hospital. They weren't in the restaurant or lounge but were found in a private area, square dancing to programmed music. "Robert, what are you doing here?" Jody asked her brother. "I'm here to arrest your lover," he said. "He's joining his mother and 16 of your co-workers in jail for fraud, theft, and other charges." "He's not my lover, he's just my boss's son," Jody replied. "I can prove I'm being paid for my time." "Look, Jody, you just said you're being paid for the services you provide," he said. "Most hookers are. Meanwhile, your husband is in the hospital, not knowing where you are, knowing that for 16 months you've been lying about your Thursday nights. Then you tell me it was just so you could sell yourself." Robert turned to the officer and asked, "Officer, did you record this on your cam?" The officer confirmed that he did. "Then arrest my sister on the charge of prostitution." "We'll leave it up to the district attorney to decide if she can be charged," Robert said authoritatively, knowing the charges wouldn't stick since there was no evidence of money transfer for sexual services. The officer walked over, read Jody her rights, placed her under arrest, and cuffed her. Jody was in complete shock. They called for a female officer to transport her to the holding cells. Although she hadn't lied, she realized she hadn't told the whole truth. By revealing only the barest facts, she had left Robert no choice. While waiting for the female officer, Jody heard her brother call their mother to inform her that Jody had been found and was under arrest for prostitution. "Don't say anything to anyone, Mom, until I talk to you before I go to see Arlie. It's best that I explain everything to him when I see him." Robert left Jody in tears as soon as the female officer arrived. He and the officer he had come with took Matt to jail. "Jody has never slept with me," Matt said. "My mother was paying her to teach me what I didn't know. Thanks to her, I have started to date." Jody thought her husband wouldn't understand. "That may be true," Robert replied. "The problem is that no one will believe it, not with 17 people being arrested. The issue for her is that I found her with you in a private setting, and she admitted on camera that she was being paid for her services." Matt saw the whole situation for what it was, a big mess. Arlie was the only innocent one in this. Jody had agreed to help him just to get his mother off her back. His mother had been wearing her down for years. He knew he had to reveal something about himself that he had never disclosed before. "It's going to be hard to convict Jody of anything," Matt said. "For the simple reason that I am gay. It's a secret I've kept from everybody, including my mom. At our first meeting, I disclosed this to Jody. All she's been doing is teaching me to overcome the personal quirks I developed as a protective measure against my mother's conduct towards me growing up." Robert relayed a message for the officer transporting Jody to bring her back to pick up her car. She was no longer being charged. After hearing Matt's comments, he concluded he was telling the truth. After locking Matt up, Robert went over to his mother's and explained what had transpired over the course of the evening and what he had learned. "The only question we have to wait on now," Jody's mom said, is how Arlie is going to view it. Will he accept what she says as the truth after months of lies? I don't know, Mom, Bob said. I'm heading over to the hospital to inform Arlie what I've learned. If I were him, I would leave her after what she has done. Bob got to me before Jody did. He explained in detail what he had learned that evening. The question I have to ask, Bob, I said, is there any way to prove that what Matt claims is true? Until I can be sure that Matt is gay, how can I be sure that what Jody explains to me is the truth? Nazareth's lead singer continued, some fools think of happiness, blissfulness, togetherness. Some fools fool themselves, I guess. They're not fooling me. It's a lonely, dark place when you have to stand alone because there is no way to prove what the truth is. That's why I was in limbo, unable to move forward until the court case proceeded. I had been fooled once, I wasn't going to let it happen a second time. I looked over at Jody. We both had our eyes filled with tears. She told me she didn't have an affair with Matt. I told her that because of our ongoing lies, I needed to be able to prove she didn't. It would take another month before the trials would start. Until then, we were in limbo. For now, Jody and our daughters were living with her mother. Jody had been given Pat Robertson's former position. The 16 other section supervisors had been let go due to a lack of trust, although they were not being charged. Nazareth's lead singer continued, I know it isn't true, I know it isn't true, love is just a lie made to make you blue. Love hurts, love hurts. I finished my drink, got up, and walked over to Jody. In my heart, I know it isn't true. I keep praying that Matt's boyfriend will come forth to prove both of you right because I need a reason to begin to trust again. Nazareth closed the song singing, I know it isn't true, I know it isn't true, love is just a lie made to make you blue. Love hurts, love hurts, love hurts. I left the bar with the most beautiful girl in the world crying because of the things she had said and done. Matt's boyfriend, a married man who turned out to be a parent of one of my students, stopped by my classroom after school one Friday asking if we could speak in private. It took him an hour to explain everything to me. He was also known to be a family friend of the Robertsons. Matt told me about the trouble his actions caused for you and your wife, the man said. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. When I heard you needed a way to verify their stories, I knew I had to come and explain it to you. Faced with the potential consequences if this became public knowledge, I vowed to him that I would not disclose his name to anyone. I literally ran to my car because I had somewhere important to go as quickly as possible. I stopped at the jewelry store before heading over to Jody's parents' place. I knocked on the door, and her father answered. Looking at me, he said, Why didn't you just walk right in? You're always welcome here. Jody was in the kitchen helping her mother prepare dinner. She turned to me in complete surprise. I got down on one knee, pulled out the new ring, and said, I know we're still married, but I was wondering if you would be willing to renew our vows and start over? I looked up at the most beautiful girl in the world, and she was crying tears of joy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.